My name is Chris Crafts, and I've got the honor to speak with you today, continuing a series that is being hosted by iSeek Solutions. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about iSeek. My wife and I have been studying for the last decade leadership development, personal development, and really the idea of how systems can implement a person's life as an individual and how they can implement an organization inside of an organization to help them get better results in everything that they do. And that's why I've kind of teamed up today with iSeek Solutions, because what they do is they're a consulting company that focuses on organizational alignment to help make sure that the direction that your company is going is in alignment with the things that it's doing on a continual basis. So this is a webinar they're doing. I'm going to share my screen with you. This is a series that that iSeek has been continuing for a while now, and it's called Winning in 2021. And whatever you feel about memes or about puns, all right, memes, puns these days are pretty much the same thing, right? Well, when it comes to winning in 2021, personally, I love it. I love the idea. I love kind of where they're going with it. But regardless of what we think, I believe we all know that we want to win in 2021, right? So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some specific principles that are within organizational alignment, that are within getting better results in what it is that you do, and helping us be able to win in what we're currently doing, and also adding some things to eliminate blind spots. So I'm going to walk through some principles. They affect all of us. And more than likely, they're probably on all of our minds after the last 18 months. But before we begin with the specifics, I'd like to share a bit of a personal story with you. A few years ago in 2017, I'm gonna go to the next slide here just to kind of show you what we're talking about today when it comes to unconscious incompetence. In 2017, my mom had a rough year. She was diagnosed with B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, leukemia, as well as coming down with a rare disease called giant cell arteritis, which causes inflammation in her arteries. And for her, it was in the back of her neck, and it actually caused a loss of sight in her left eye. Now, today she's doing great. Even though that was a rough year, she is actually traveling the world as a missionary. I tell people all the time, my mom is in her 60s, and I wish that I had the energy and the resolve and the passion that she had for life. But there is one major problem that she ended up with after all this is over, and it's blind spots. Now, think about when you're driving and you lose sight in your left eye, that can cause a lot of problems. She's still able to drive safely, albeit with a lot of blind spot mirrors, and she's extremely careful in where she does, and she hasn't caused any accidents on the road. But around the house, she can tend to run into things while walking, and that's obvious because when you've got blind spots and you can't see, she'll ask me from time to time, who put this wall here? I don't remember this here. And sometimes she has a hard time focusing on things. We were going through one of her bedrooms the other day, and she found some of those 3D puzzles. And she said, well, this doesn't do any good. I can't focus the right way for this. And this is what I thought. It's such a good metaphor for what blind spots can do in our organizations. They tend to create a lack of focus. They cause us to be easily distracted from the plans that we definitely need to do. And they run us into obstacles that we didn't see coming. And the only way for us to notice them is to put systems in place. It's one of my favorite words, to be able to protect us. So before we get started, let's talk about the difference between sight and vision. All right, Dr. Miles Monroe, I threw some pictures in here because I love pictures. Dr. Miles Monroe threw this out in one of his best books, The Principles and Power of Vision. He said that sight is a function of the eyes, but vision is a function of the heart. And you see, my mom has blind spots in her sight, but her vision is 20/20. She knows exactly what she's put on this earth to do. She's focusing on other people. However, this is a key point. She does guard her vision from blind spots as well. So, and you may not see where this is going with organizations. I just wanted to throw some of these principles out because here's the deal. In your organization, you have a form of vision and you have a form of sight. And if we don't intentionally, you're going to hear that word come up constantly today. If we don't intentionally guard each of them, our vision and our sight, it's very easy for blind spots to trip us up. And I want to pause for a second because I want to help you understand. I do these teachings a lot, and sometimes I tend to throw out a lot of information, and I'll have people tell me, Chris, can you go back to here? Can you repeat this? This is really what I want every one of our listeners today to do. I want you to focus on nugget thinking. Look for a nugget that is based on what you're currently walking through in your staff, in your organization, something you can implement immediately. And that's why I put all this together. We're going to lay out a buffet of information. When it comes to sight and vision, maybe that's not for you, but I want to challenge you with this one. Stephen Covey, in one of his best books of all time, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says this: all things are created twice. All things are created twice. The first creation is the mental creation, very similar to what you see here, the blueprint of a house. The second creation is the physical. It's the actual house itself. In your organization, everything that you do is created twice. Going back to Miles Monroe, once with vision and once with sight. Or with Stephen Covey, once in the first creation and then the second creation. And the first question for you to consider in your particular organization is this: do we have blind spots in our vision, the first creation, or do we have blind spots in our, call it sight, for lack of a better term, or the second creation? You see, since we've got a building up here, carpenters have a rule: measure twice, cut once. Why? Because there's a chance I missed something in the first creation. So to figure out where we might have blind spots, let's discuss something that author Chris Brady calls the path to mastery. And the internet, when you look it up, it calls it the 4 steps of competence. So I want to walk through this process because this opened my eyes to a lot of things. First of all, if you're frustrated with where you're at, whether it be in your personal learning or your organizational status, you need to understand that you're probably stuck somewhere in this cycle. And what's really neat, though, is that all of us should be working towards mastery in our craft, whatever that may be. So the first realization is one that we're not even aware of, which is the crazy part. It's called unconscious incompetence. According to this chart, you are unaware of the skill and your lack of proficiency, or as Chris Brady says, you don't know what you don't know. So if I'm beginning a new career path, let's say that I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to begin my own business. Unconscious incompetence says, I don't even know where to start. I'm not even aware of what I need to learn. I hope this makes sense. It's literally the home of blind spots. And we're going to come back to this in a moment. But unconscious incompetence, we don't even know what we need to learn. And then sometimes, like the Bible says, someone wakes up to themselves, right? We usually wake up to conscious incompetence. Now I know there's a skill, but I have no talent in it. Or as I've heard said, unconscious incompetence, you don't know that you stink. Conscious incompetence says, I know that I stink, right? So that is the first couple steps of the process. And that's usually a quick process. It's kind of an awakening to where you recognize if you walk into a new job, say in IT, you walk in on the first day, you have no clue how much you have to learn. After the first week, you go, wow, I have a lot to learn. And this happens in every one of our habits. This happens in every one of our learning skills. Now, after conscious incompetence comes the longest, hardest level of learning is the process from conscious incompetence to conscious competence, to where you are able to use the skill with effort. This is where this process from 2 to 3, if you want to call it that, this is where you're investing in yourself. This is where you're reading. This is where you're listening to trainers and experts. You're attending seminars and webinars. You're practicing. You're making mistakes. You're becoming competent at your craft. You don't have mastery yet, but you're at least good enough where you don't have to worry, how do I do every single step of the process? But eventually, you become so good that you aren't even aware of how good you are. You become unconsciously competent to where you performing the skill, I love the way they describe it, becomes automatic. It becomes habit. It becomes part of your culture, part of your identity. Anything that your organization tries to implement immediately, this is the process it will go through. And so many, where do you think that the most frustration lives? I would argue most likely the most frustration lies between the bottom two as you're working to become consciously competent. Let me ask you this. Where do you think most people quit this process? The same place. You're not going to quit when you don't even know what to quit. And most people, unless they get completely overwhelmed, they're not going to quit at step 2. They're just becoming aware of what's needed. This is the process that small businesses die. This is the process where leaders quit. This is the process that has the most turnover. And this is where we must work. And this particular webinar is, I can't go over everything that's needed there. We're talking about blind spots, but I want to encourage you to continue to tie into some of iSeek's webinars that they have and do your own personal research and personal development when it comes to yourself as a leader, first in your own life, and then leading the team in your organization. So let's talk a little bit more about unconscious competence, because I want to help you understand this. For my wife and I want to give you an example. We have a wonderful marriage. We've worked very, very hard. We just celebrated 16 years, and we've worked very hard to get better, both as individuals and continue to learn how to be a better couple. We've often had people ask us what we do and how they can do it. And I got to be honest, a lot of times I've got to give a lot of thought to why we have a good marriage, because we've walked through this process, and not that we've mastered it by any means, but certain things in our marriage, we don't have to give conscious thought to how Chris makes it. It's kind of like, for most of us, I hope taking a shower becomes something we do, becomes part of our culture. So let me kind of give you a couple examples that I thought about that as I was making these notes. For Laura and I, we apologize very quickly. We've had to learn that over time. Sometimes I wouldn't apologize very quickly, so we'd carry bitterness. These days, apologizing quickly has just become part of who we are. If I do something stupid, I may not even be done with the stupid thing yet, and I'm already apologizing. It just becomes unconscious competence. This was a big one. We allow small emotional explosions without becoming offended and taking it personally. And you may say, Chris, you've totally lost your mind. This has nothing to do with blind spots. Go with me for a moment. We allow each other to have those small emotional explosions. I used to get very offended and very hurt on every single thing that was said, and I would assign terrible motives. Now, over the years, this just becomes part of who we are. We just let it go much faster than we did. So we have deep conversations because we're reading the same books. It's become part of our culture. It's become part of who we are. So how does this apply to you? How does this idea of unconscious competence and mastery apply to you? Let me ask you this. What if these practices that I'm about to talk about could become part of your culture without even having to think about it? What about excellence? What if excellence could become unconscious competence inside your culture? What about encouragement for employees by the leaders and by each other? What about focusing on both quality and quantity and not settling for one or the other? What about taking personal responsibility and owning mistakes in your culture? That's the reason that you want to go through this process. So where do blind spots live? Out of these 4, we've already mentioned it once, blind spots tend to live in that area of unconscious incompetence. When we don't know what we don't know, this is the natural place for them to develop. There will be places in this process that you need to grow, but you don't know to grow in yet. So let's finish up with some steps to identify and eliminate blind spots so we can begin this process. Because here's the danger. Those things I talked about earlier, excellence, quality, and quantity, taking personal responsibility, you cannot master, and your organization will not be able to master these things until you begin locating and eliminating blind spots in the first step. So how do we identify them? If I don't know what I don't know, how do I even know how to find what I don't know? Don't try to follow that. It's too much. I know. So let's at least today take a couple steps from unconscious incompetence up to conscious incompetence. Let's become aware of some of these. And I've got a simple little 3-step, not even a 3-step process, but 3 things. And you're probably going to be able to do at least one of these things and begin the process of finding these blind spots. Here's the first one. Beware of pride. Many blind spots exist because the leaders are too prideful to ask for help or to ask the other thoughts of the team. I've spoken with a lot of different organizations, and one of the biggest issues becomes that the people on their team don't know if they have a voice. And I hope that makes sense. The people on their team are unaware if they're even allowed to speak up when it comes to these. I want you to consider the difference between an amateur golfer and a professional golfer. And you can choose any sport that you'd like. Golf was just the first one that came to my mind when it came to this. The professional golfer understands the value in investing in their skill set, and they understand the value to find a third party that can stand off to the side and point out blind spots. The amateur, oh, by the way, that's why the professional hires a coach. That's why the professional will attend. Anyways, let's keep going. The amateur, whether because they choose not to invest in themselves or because they don't want to listen to someone else, they try to get better on their own. And what I'll encourage you to do is to break down any walls that are holding you back from asking questions. Emerson said, everyone is my superior in some way. In that, I learn from them. You can learn something from everybody on your team. I would really encourage you to look up the story I just heard recently by an author named Dan Hawkins, but it's a story of the gentleman who came up with the idea for Flamin' Hot Cheetos. It's a fantastic story. The gentleman who even brought up the idea was a janitor at one of the Frito-Lay's plants. And he brought up the idea, and all of a sudden now he's in charge of, now he teaches at schools and all this kind of stuff, but he took a chance. But I'm thinking more of the leaders of Frito-Lay that asked the question, we're willing to hear from anybody. And an entire line of products may not even exist today if the founders of Frito-Lay weren't willing to ask for questions. The people on your team can help you identify blind spots, and you most likely, it would be good for you to find a coach, to find a consultant, to find someone to help you identify the blind spots. David Schwartz, in his book, The Magic of Thinking Big, says many people, I want you to hear this, become so accustomed to themselves that they fail to see ways for improvement. What does that sound like? Blind spots. Sometimes blind spots are present because we don't want to listen. Number 2, stop asking the wrong questions. Start asking the right questions. This idea comes out of Tommy Newberry's book, The 4-8 Principle. And he says the reason people are living based on the wrong answers is because they're asking the wrong questions. Your goal should be to move up the process of mastery, to become more and more competent, to where eventually you're becoming unconsciously competent. So how do we know which areas to become better at? Here's the thing I really want you to do. Take a few minutes today, and I want you to think about the top 3 or 4 frustrations or issues you're facing in your organization or with your staff or even in your personal life. Because here's the fun part about this. Success principles are success principles, and they can be implemented in a business organization or in a marriage. So this is a principle you can take even inside your own family with your kids, if you're able to do this. Take a few minutes and think about those frustrations, because the results you're experiencing, listen, that are not in line with your vision are likely happening because of blind spots. And the goal has to be, okay, I'm facing this frustration. I'm facing this problem, this obstacle. The goal should be to make adjustments towards identifying the root cause instead of filling your schedule addressing symptoms. Now, I brought this up to a group last week, and they said, Chris, what are the right questions? How do I figure out the right questions? And this was my answer, and it may sound vague, but I want to help you understand, I can't answer that for your organization. I can't tell you what the right answers are, but I will tell you this. I'm going to go back to the previous slide real quick. If you're living in an area of unconscious incompetence, you don't even know that you're looking for you don't even know the right, I'm trying to say this right. You don't even know that you need to look for the right answers. Before you need to identify what the right answers are you even aware you need to look for them? Are you even aware that this is something you need to do? Because once you're aware that you need to do it, then the creativity to find them will be unlocked so you can actually do it. This is something I put in my notes. An organization's self-awareness begins with humility and honesty when they are willing to confront brutal reality. Is your organization, are you willing to confront brutal reality and ask yourself, are we even asking the right questions? Where is it that there are blind spots? But you know, one of the number one issues that I have when I try to help people understand this is they tell me they don't have the time to search for blind spots. So here's my third point, and this is a big one. And yes, it's semantics. Yes, it's just a little bit of a word change, but I want you to see this. I would really encourage you to schedule your priorities instead of prioritizing what's on your schedule. The way that most people handle their time is they allow their schedule to fill up and then they just put out fires all day. And I would say, I can't see everybody. I would say raise your hand if you've been there, but we just tend to put out fires. And a key to eliminating blind spots is to intentionally schedule time for adjustments. You see, in cars, we have blind spot tools. We have tools to help keep us on track. In your organization, you have tools as well. At least you should have some tools that can be used to make adjustments, to start identifying where can we move from unconscious incompetence to, oh, here's an area we need to get better. In your organization, you should have tools such as coaches, such as consultants, such as books and audios and seminars. You should have brother and sister companies who maybe are not competitors to you, but you can learn from, that you can learn principles from. In one word, it's intentionality. You will never accidentally discover and eliminate blind spots. I'm going to say that one more time. Because so many of us just think, oh, we're going to wake up one day, hey, I've got the answer. No, no, no. You will never intentionally, or you will never accidentally discover and eliminate blind spots. And over the last 18 months, I got to be honest with you, and everything that I see, complacency has become public enemy number one. At least it has in my life and a lot of people that I talk to. It's so easy just to let things pass. As Stephen Covey talks about, put a big rock in your schedule where you and your staff can discuss the potential of blind spots. Call it a sniff test. Where do we stink? Where do we stink? We need to take a shower. Where do we stink? Where are some areas that maybe we're incompetent and we don't know? So beware of pride. Be willing to ask questions from anybody to identify blind spots. Start asking the right questions, or at least start by admitting maybe we're asking the wrong questions. And then schedule your priorities. Make sure time management is an intentional thing and that you're not just putting out fires all day. So in closing, I'm really going to encourage you to zoom out, because we can get so focused on today. We can get so focused on everything that's going wrong right now. And I'm going to encourage you to zoom out. And I'm not saying this is an easy process. I'm saying it's necessary. If your craft, if the thing that you're trying to do with your organization is worthy of your time, then I would encourage, let's do it right. Let's find and eliminate the things that maybe we're not so good at and we're not really aware. And then let's make some adjustments. Your ultimate goal should be mastery of your craft. So I appreciate you tying in today. I'm going to put one more slide up. So this is just my information. If you would like to get a hold of me, feel free. I can do, I do several speaking engagements and group teachings, and I would really encourage you to reach out to iSeek Solutions. If your company needs some help when it comes to organizational alignment, if you could use that third party to come in and say, hey, I'm not sure where it is that we're missing, but I'd like a third party to come in and help us look, then contact Marche, contact Michael, contact Annie over at iSeek Solutions. And I hope that there was something in this teaching today that you were able to take away. I hope you have a wonderful lunch. And I hope more than anything else that you start moving in every area of your organization from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. We'll see you next time. Marche, I'm going to give it back to you.